Thank you, everybody. Happy February 1st. Thank you for coming to today's meeting. If you can please mute your microphone and all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, City Clerk. Will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Ibarra,
Yes, here.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
I'm here.
Councilmember Lopez,
Here.
Councilmember Larios,
Here.
Councilmember Merlo.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move.
May I have a second?
I am.
With the motion from Councilmember Lopez and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Davis. City Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Mayor Ibarra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember Larios,
Yes.
Councilmember Merlo.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll take public comment from the members of the audience. If you'd like to provide a comment through Zoom, please click the raise hand buttons. Please state your name and business affiliation, if any, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Are there any public comments at this time?
There are none at this time.
Thank you. We'll now go on to presentation item. Presentation item number 1 is the presentation on pension obligation bonds. Workshop 1, Finance Director Williams will present the item.
Yes, good morning, Honorable Mayor, honorable members of the City Council, and thank you for the opportunity to present for the Council's consideration, evaluation, and assessment this first part of a two-part workshop on the presentation of some options for pension obligation bonds. By way of background, the Council is aware that historically our pension obligations, our unfunded liabilities, and the resulting payments are one of the largest, if not perhaps the second largest line item expenditure throughout our various city departments. To address this, the city contracted with 2 firms to perform a study over the last few months, and this has been going on since last summer. We last September presented the first round of our findings from our actuarial firm, but since that time we've had the opportunity each year. CalPERS, our pension system, provides refreshed data. And we've had the opportunity late in the calendar year to incorporate that in a refreshed study that brings us to this present time. So here today we have Ira Summer with one of our contracted firms, GovInvest, to walk us through the implications of unfunded liability, what we refer to as the discount rate, future costs, and what we're aiming to do strategically in terms of leveling out these costs over the next couple of decades, and ultimately retiring this liability while also gaining short and midterm savings as well as long-term savings to the city. So with that, Ira, if you'd like to share your screen with the presentation. And one note before we get started, just this is meant to be interactive. This is the opportunity for the council to stop and ask any questions. This is why we're taking this over the course of 2 workshops. We want any questions or concerns to be addressed and everything clearly articulated.
And if I could, I'm sorry, Mr. Summer, before you get started, I just wanted to let anyone know that the successor agency meeting, which was scheduled for 9 a.m., will follow the council meeting as soon as it adjourns.
Okay, now can I go?
Yes, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I wouldn't want people, interrupting and asking questions about something completely different. But as Scott mentioned, I would appreciate, as we're going through, if you do have questions about what's going on here. The purpose of this is to help you better understand how the defined benefit program that you have for your employees through CalPERS works. What you're going to have to do as a city to be able to pay to keep the promises that you've made to your employees, and some of the actions that you might be able to take to be able to better control these costs and do it more cost effectively. So the first part of this is background. I work with pensions. I've actually been working with pensions for over 30 years. So, but I know that some of you have a real life and don't do this. So I want to make sure we spend a little time, giving you background on exactly how all of this works. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about the basics of how CalPERS works and what benefit programs you have. Talk about how you're doing compared to other cities across California. Talk about the big things that have happened with CalPERS and to CalPERS in the last year and how that impacted your cost and your funded status. And then go back and do a refresher on pension obligation bonds, the discussion that you did in September, because it's been a few months. And again, taking questions during this whole time. Anytime you've got questions, stop me. I'd rather you didn't, if you got lost on slide 5, the rest of this session is going to be awful. So in terms of the basics, you're in a defined benefit plan. So the benefits that you're giving to the employees are what you have promised. The funding for this plan is relatively simple. The money that goes into the plan is designed to be enough to equal the money that goes out of the plan. The money coming out of the plan comes from benefits and expenses. And almost all of it is benefits. Expenses are less than 0.2% of the amount that goes out the door. CalPERS is actually one of the most cost-effective pension administrators in the country. The money coming into the plan comes from 3 sources: the city's contributions, employee contributions, and investment income. And of those 3, investment income is by far the largest. Depending on how the markets are doing, investment income will be anywhere between 60 and 90% of the money that goes out the door comes from investment income. So what happens with the markets has a big impact on the contributions that you and your employees need to make. Now, in order to be able to do this, CalPERS needs to make some projections, make some assumptions as to what's going to be happening in the future. The assumptions basically come in 2 categories. Economic assumptions, the assumptions related to money, things like inflation, investment return, salary growth, and demographic assumptions. These are the assumptions related to people. So it's when are your employees expected to retire? Which of them might get disabled? How long do they live after retirement? Which ones might quit before they're entitled to a benefit? So CalPERS pulls this all together and comes out with a projection of how much they're going to be paying. And from that, figures out how much you need to pay. Now, all of this is based on actually the benefit that your employees get. You actually have 4 different benefit structures for the city of Vernon. 2 benefit structures for what they refer to as your safety members. These are the people who have been police officers, firefighters. They get a slightly better benefit. Those who were hired before 2013, 2012, and before are in a slightly better benefit called 3% of 50. That means that they get 3% of their pay for each year they work if they retire at age 50. So if they work for 20 years and retire at age 50, 3% times 20 years is 60% of their final pay they get each year for the rest of their lives, along with the COLA, so a cost of living adjustment each year of up to 2% depending on inflation. Those hired 2013 and after are in what's referred to as the PEPRA program. PEPRA stands for Public Employee Pension Reform Act. This is a law that was passed by Governor Brown and his administration and the legislature back then that made some reforms to pensions. Some of the biggest things that he did is, rather than giving you a lot of different options as to what benefit structures you can provide for your employees, they basically set the same benefit provisions for every city, every agency, all across the state of California. Prior to this, what would often happen is that agencies would be competing for new hires for recruiting by improving their benefits better than their neighbors. And then when that would happen, the next cycle, their neighbor would get a benefit structure slightly better than them. And you keep trying to do better than each other. And it means that your benefits keep moving up and the costs keep moving up, and it got out of control. So here, everybody has the same thing. Everybody's going to have the same benefits. But they come in two categories: safety, police and fire, and other employees, miscellaneous. So miscellaneous employees, their benefits are slightly lower than those for safety. Physical toll is not as much, retirement age a little bit later. So your employees who were hired before PEPRA kicked in 2013 are in the 2.7 to 55. The standard is the 2 at 62. That's going on for most of the employees you're hiring now. I do want to note that you have some cost sharing in place. So because your costs are so high, and we'll talk about how high they are in relation to everybody else in a moment, you're charging or having employees pay an extra 3% of their pay on top of their regular contributions to CalPERS to help pay for some of the cost of the pensions. So, you've taken that as one of the steps to help control costs. We'll show in a moment how much of an impact that has. So how is your agency doing in relation to others? Now, in order to do that, we focus basically on two metrics. One is funded percentage, how well funded the plan is so far as of the most recent actuarial evaluation, which was done as of June 30, 2020. And we do that by taking the plan assets, dividing by the plan liabilities. In theory, at some point, if you intend to pay for all the benefits you promised, you're going to try and get your plan assets to equal your plan liabilities. Right now, we'll take a look at where they are. And the other metric is contribution percentage. That is the amount of your pensionable compensation to your employees that you pay to CalPERS every year. And by doing it as a percentage of payroll, we allow easy comparisons from one city to the next. Now, we've limited this comparison to try and make it, I guess, an apples to apples comparison. For your safety plans are in what CalPERS refers to as the risk pool. When you have fewer than 100 active employees in a plan, they move you into the risk pool. They do that to basically help the agency. If you're a small plan and you have one service-connected disability or service-connected death, that can increase your rates dramatically. So by sharing these risks across the smaller agencies across the state, you aren't getting as impacted by this. So you're sharing some of the risk. That's why they're calling it a risk pool. Your miscellaneous plan is bigger. It's not in the risk pool. It's what they refer to as an agent plan. So for your safety plan, we compared the costs and the funded percentage against other plans of the risk pool separately for the PEPRA versus the classic, the pre-PEPRA plan. And for miscellaneous, it's all together. And we compared you against other CalPERS plans that are not part of the risk pool. And what we found, starting with miscellaneous, your funded percentage is a little below average, but about where most of the agencies are on the miscellaneous plan across the state. So you're not in bad shape, but you're not in great shape at this point. In terms of your contribution, though, your contribution rate is one of the highest in the state. You are paying 41% of pay for your miscellaneous employees. And most agencies throughout the state, as you can see here, are paying less than 40 and some even less than 20. So this is an additional cost that you are putting on for all of your non-safety employees. In terms of the safety, your funded percentage for both police and fire are, again, a little below average at 67%. Your costs, on the other hand, are significantly higher than the others. And I think a big portion of this is because the size of your police and fire departments have shrunk dramatically from where they were just a few years ago. And so you had a liability for a lot of employees, and now you're spreading the cost over fewer employees. And that, as a percentage of payroll, it becomes a pretty big burden. So you are one of the more expensive police and fire plans in the state of California. And that's going to be impacting your budget. So again, part of this is helping you understand why it's important. Most of this cost comes from paying for past liabilities, your unfunded liability. So we're going to, at the end of this, talk about pension obligation bonds as a way to lower the cost of paying off your unfunded liability so that you can bring these more in line where everybody else is by finding a more effective way to pay for this. On the PEPRA side, because you moved into the risk pool just in the last couple of years, your funded percentage is lower than the agencies that were in the risk pool all along. There's a transition that they put in where you have your previous unfunded liability and a share of it goes into this plan. And that's causing your unfunded liability to be, your funded percentage to be lower. And because of it, your contribution rates to be higher in the PEPRA plan. This will probably just naturally go away in a few years, and it'll slide over to where the rest of these are. But for at least for the next few years, you're going to be paying significantly more than everybody else for these plans. I'm going to take a breath for a moment and see if there are any questions so far about where you are and what's been going on. Whether I have somebody at least say something so I know I haven't put you all to sleep, or you haven't just decided this is it, I'm ending it all, this is more than I can take. No sound. Okay, that's not really.
No, there's no question. I don't have questions. Council, does any council member have a question for him?
I don't have any at this moment. Thank you.
One quick comment before we continue. It's, I think, important to note that when we look at the percentage changes, the absolute dollars didn't necessarily change, but some of that was the result of the transition to county. And I will note later, but that is a closed plan, the fire portion of that. Now that absolutely helps, but it temporarily skews the percentages in a way that might look a little bit alarming, but we're not referring to absolute dollars.
Right, but it does, it does mean that when your police chief or your fire chief are trying to put their budget together, they're trying to do, they still have to make the same, basically the same level payments that they did before on a smaller base, and that becomes difficult to do. Okay, so let's talk about what's happened with CalPERS in last year, and there have been some significant changes. The biggest thing that's happened by far is CalPERS had a great year with their investments. They earned 21.3%. That is a very strong investment return, the best they've done in a decade, one of the strongest they've done in their history. They exceeded their assumed return by over 14%. And I'll let you know, and I'm mentioning this right now because that's going to come back in just a moment as being a very important thing to do. This next slide shows what their investment returns, the green bars are what their investment returns have been year to year. The red line is what their assumed rate of return, otherwise known as the discount rate, has been over time. And you'll notice that it fluctuates up and down. Sometimes they have good years, sometimes they have bad years. Generally, they're doing okay. They're positive. They have a few periods where they lost money. This was the .com crash in early 2000s and the Great Recession. In the Great Recession, they learned a really valuable lesson, which is when they made their investments very aggressive right after the .com crash in order to be able to get solid returns. And they did that for a few years. They were one of the best sets of returns across the country for pension plans. What they learned in the Great Recession is that when you are aggressive in your investing and the market's doing well, you earn a lot of money. When you're aggressive in your investing and the markets do badly, you get killed. And agencies across California can't afford to necessarily adjust your budgets when the markets go down, because when the markets go down, it's usually the same time that the economy is not doing well. So cities have revenue shortfalls at the same time that CalPERS now needs to ask you for more money because they lost money, which is not good timing. So what CalPERS learned from that and decided is that what they need to do is lower the risk in their portfolio, become a little bit less aggressive. The problem is, as I mentioned before, with bigger risk comes higher expected returns. And the more money, well, let's start with the simple part. Because they earned 21% this year, more money coming from investment return means less money needs to come from the city's contributions. That's good news. But if they lower the risk in the portfolio, that means what would happen is they would be lowering the expected return that they're expecting to get in future years. So what CalPERS did is they took advantage of this lowering of contributions and strong return. And they created in 2015 a funding risk mitigation policy. And what this policy said was they want to lower the risk level. They're going to wait until years in which they earn a lot of money. They beat the assumed rate of return by enough. And they're going to be lowering contributions and take that as an opportunity to lower the risk, lower the expected future return, raise contributions back up a little. So you still have a net gain with net lowering of contributions, but this is their chance to get rid of some of that risk without hurting cities as much. So 2021 was the first year since the 2015 policy was put in place that they actually beat the assumed investment return by enough. They had to beat it by at least 2% to trigger this. And this year they beat it by 14%. So by beating it by more, they were able to lower the risk of the portfolio more, lower the assumed rate of return. So they lowered it from 7 to 6.8. And if you remember what I talked about earlier, less money assumed to be coming from future investment returns means that more money is going to need to come from contributions. But the net impact of this, and I'll show you that in just a moment, is you got a much bigger reduction from the 1 year's strong return than the increase you're getting from this change in expected future returns. Now, this was not the only change that CalPERS made this year. Every 4 years by law, CalPERS is required to review all of their actuarial assumptions and methodologies. So they took a look at all this and they decided the biggest change by far was this change in discount rate. They made a few other small changes. They lowered expected inflation from 2.5% to 2.3%. They changed wage growth just a tiny bit from 2.75 to 2.8. And they made some very small changes to life expectancy, retirement, termination, disability. Because of all the weird stuff that's been happening during sort of the COVID times, that sort of made their experience something they don't expect to be happening too often. So they didn't want to be able to use that as a credible experience to match up against. They're not expecting this many people to die that often. They're not expecting so many people to get laid off by cities on a regular basis. Retirements went up. So they decided they wouldn't make major changes right now, and we'll see how this plays out over the next few years. Yes, Mayor, you have a question?
Sorry for interrupting. I just want to make sure everybody's okay. We just had a shake right now. So I just want to make sure staff is okay and everybody's okay.
I thought
That
it was a
was-
truck. Was that an earthquake?
No, it was an earthquake. There
Oh,
was
wow.
no truck at all.
Okay, it had nothing to do with my presentation. This is not
No,
that
I'm so
shocking
sorry.
material.
I'm gonna check on myself right quick.
Okay,
Okay,
Should-
we're all remote, so I just want to make sure everybody's okay.
yeah, this is one time when I'm very happy I'm in Northern California instead of Southern California. Okay.
All right, I'm sorry. All right, go ahead and continue.
No, that's fine. Anytime you want to have an earthquake, go ahead. That's
I think it just needed to shake us up so we could get involved.
okay. Now does anybody have any questions? Right. Okay.
You know what? I do have a question. Why did CalPERS only reduce it by 0.2%? Why wouldn't they, if they made a 21% increase, why would they only reduce it by 0.2?
Let's take a look at the impact of doing that. Okay, because basically, which is the next set of slides. The orange line here is where your costs would have been if they had just earned their 7% target and kept the assumptions where they were. The blue line here is where you are because of the combination of the 21% return and lowering the discount rate. So you end out seeing savings. In fact, you're going to see millions in savings over the next 20 years. They could have pushed a little more. There were discussions by CalPERS about doing that. But one of the impacts of this is employee contribution rates for those in PEPRA are tied to what's referred to as the normal cost. The normal cost is the actuarial term for the cost for service earned in the current year that you're working. And employees pay half of the normal cost for PEPRA employees. So by lowering the discount rate, they're raising the normal cost, and employee contribution rates are going up a little bit, expected to go up a little bit beginning in 2022. Actually, maybe 2023 before they kick in. So this, they're trying to balance off the needs, the desire to keep things relatively stable, which is part of what this does, against the long-term cost of keeping things low. Because one of the things you'll notice here is this big return cut off the peak that we were expecting in contributions. Your contribution rates were, right now paying about 15 million, expected to go up to about 20 million a year. And that was going to peak out somewhere around 2027. Most cities across California were increasing at that rate expected to increase all the way till 2030 before they start coming down. But what we've seen across the state is because of this 21% return, that costs are basically hitting their peak next year and then starting to come down from there. So we've cut off some of the extra amounts. Now, one thing that's very important that I want to mention, these projections assume that CalPERS hits their funding target each year in the future. Just like the markets can give, the markets can take away. If you've been watching the financial markets over the last few weeks, the last few years, you will probably have noticed volatility higher than it's ever been before. The markets have been jumping up and down more than your room just was. So this is, we don't know where the markets are going. So it could very easily undo all of these savings at some point. And that's another reason why when you have potentially revenue or an opportunity to lower costs again, even though this is good news and you're saving millions, it's a good time to take advantage of it when you can, because when the cost increases come in, again, they usually come when revenues are low, when the city is struggling to meet its budget, to put its budget together. And that's not the time you want to have to start making tough decisions on how to do better with your pension plan. In terms of funded percentage, the funded percentage jumped up. The 21% return for most cities increased funded percentages by about 10%. The lowering of the discount rate dropped at about 2 to 3%. The net impact is it jumped up about 7% from where it was. You went from being expected to be around 70% to almost 80%. So you're going to be doing better moving forward. 80% is a target that most agencies look for to start feeling comfortable that they're in good shape. And eventually the funding methodology forces you up to the 100% target. And the sooner you can get there, the lower your cost is going to be moving forward. But in terms of back to the question the mayor had about why didn't they lower it more, there was a lot of pressure on CalPERS to try and, not drop the discount rate too far. The funding risk mitigation policy that they had in place said they needed to drop it at least 0.2% with the 14% excess return. They did that. Because they were in a year where they were supposed to be looking at their asset allocation and their expected return, they used this as an opportunity to move some of their assets around to different categories. And they think they can get better return, without quite as much risk as they would have needed before. I don't know if that helps. Any other questions?
Just on that point, so in summary, it just would have, even though 0.2% doesn't seem that much, it would just be too aggressive if they came in with 0.5%.
Right, yeah, 0.5%, dropping it to 6.5 would have, in terms of contribution rates, wiped out almost all of the savings. 6.625 would definitely have wiped out all the savings. So, and they looked at that. There are definitely some groups within California that were pushing in that direction, but they needed to balance things out, and they feel confident that they can get the kind of return that they're looking for. Now, I want to be careful about talking about this because they also mentioned that they expect the investment returns over the next decade to be a little weaker than they are after that. And that, when we saw, because I'm about to go talk about pension obligation bonds again, if you take a look at sort of some of the difference between the basic analysis that we've got here and the analysis that your other actuarial consultant, Bartel, put together, one of the things that they did is they assumed that there were going to be weaker returns in the next decade. And one of the lessons we've learned with pension obligation bonds is that the returns that you get in the first few years have a much bigger impact on whether or not you make money or lose money on the bonds, or how much you make on the bonds compared to the returns 15, 20 years out in the future. So the short-term impact is much more important than the long-term impact of investment. So before we get to the pension obligation bonds, any more questions on where you are right now? Again, your unfunded liability dropped relatively dramatically. That's this one. So the amount so rather than having, I think it was close to 150 million before to pay off your unfunded liability, it's down to about 110, 120 million. So it's a smaller amount to fill the hole. And that assumes you're trying to get to 100% funded. Not all agencies necessarily need to make, or want to make the jump all the way up to 100% funded right away. No other questions? No other earthquakes? We will move on to a quick refresher on pension obligation bonds. Again, this is the similar presentation of what you saw in September. In concept, pension obligation bonds are simple. Okay, basically your agency is paying off CalPERS at 6.8. That means you're effectively borrowing money from them at 6.8. If you can go out to the market to borrow money at 4, and I'm using 4 as a conservative amount, pension obligation bonds, even though rates are going up right now, when they hit bottom, agencies were getting about 2% rates on pension obligation bonds. My guess is you can still probably get a rate somewhere around 3 at this point. So I'm being conservative with 4. But if you get your debt at 4%, you basically replace the 6.8% debt with a 4% debt. It's like in some ways, it's like refinancing the mortgage on your home. If you pay less in interest, your rates go down. It's good news. It saves you money. So we put together a simple example. We said, okay, your unfunded liabilities will be about 120 million. What happens if you issue pension obligation bonds? You take the proceeds from that, 4% interest. We assumed 12-year level dollar payments and put that money right into CalPERS. We assume that future experience matched assumptions and that CalPERS doesn't change assumptions during the life of the bonds. And what we see here, the red are the pension obligation bond payments. The green were the payments you were making for unfunded liability. And the line here is the total unfunded liability payments you were making before. What happens is you have you expect to save about $38 million over the life of the bonds. Now, again, another difference between our analysis and the Bartel analysis is Bartel assumed your payments were going to be stretching out further, almost all the way out here for 20 years. We looked at this and said, okay, if you can keep your payments about the same where they are right now and pay this off faster, the faster you pay off the payments, the more you're going to save. So that is a choice. If there are a bunch of choices involved in this. The first choice is, do you want to issue pension obligation bonds? No one's going to make you do it. Agencies across the state have done it, and a lot of agencies have said, no, this is not for us. So first choice is, do you want to look at this and potentially issue the bonds? The next set of choices after you pull in, advisors and other things to help you through this process is, how long do you want the payments to be? Where do you want to try and get the savings? And a lot of agencies have pushed for trying to keep their payments about where they are, maybe save a little money, maybe stretch it out a little bit longer and lower payments in the short term to give a little budget relief, but mostly trying to get long-term savings for the agency to save you money. So that's a separate question that, again, if you decide to go forward with this, should be part of the thought process and discussion process that'll be coming back to the city council, and your staff will be talking about with the experts that you hire to advise you before you make the decisions. I do want to mention, because again, I started this as the really simple discussion that, oh, they're so simple. The thing is, it's not just this simple. Pension obligation bonds are not magic. And I've been working on pension obligation bonds on and off for about 30 years at this point. First pension obligation bonds in California, Sonoma County in the mid-90s was a client of mine, worked with them on that. They put the money in. The market shot through the roof. Their county treasurer was considered a genius because he did the right thing at the right time. And agencies thought, oh, this is simple. We ought to, if we can get a low interest rate, we save money all the time. They treated this like those diet pills that I keep seeing pop up in my on my internet feed, where you don't need to diet, you don't need to exercise, you just take these magic pills, and suddenly you are in great shape and it all goes away. And they thought pension obligation bonds were basically the pension equivalent of that you didn't need to worry about your investments or worry about your benefit structure or any of that. You just issue pension obligation bonds and your debt just magically disappears. It's not really the way it works. There are some risks involved, and I will run you through in a moment the biggest ones. They are, though, pension obligation bonds are a valuable tool to be used along with other potential tools, to use with additional contributions, to be used with setting up a pension 115 trust that can help you stabilize the cost, with setting up a policy to pay off your remaining or future unfunded liabilities when they occur. Because unlike a mortgage on your house or the payments on your car that once you pay it off, they're done, pension unfunded liabilities can disappear and then reappear because of things outside of your control. When the markets drop down, you have an unfunded liability. When CalPERS reviews their assumptions and decides that people are going to live forever again, that creates more payments in the future, bigger unfunded liability. So there are a lot of things that can happen that are outside of your control that create an unfunded liability, and having a policy in place to talk about how you're going to deal with this, both the unfunded liability that you haven't paid off and any that occurs in the future, is an important part of the process in getting ready for pension obligation bonds. Now, the biggest risks, in the short term, whether or not you save money is based on this difference between the interest rate you pay to the bondholders and the interest rate you're paying CalPERS. But in the long term, whether or not you save money is based on the difference between the rate at which you're paying bondholders versus the actual returns that CalPERS earns. So if the investment returns aren't quite the 6.8% that CalPERS assumes, then your savings are going to go down. So this was, if they earned the 6.8, we said you were saving 38 million. CalPERS, on the other hand, earns 6% each year. What happens is a new unfunded liability gets created in the pension plan. So it would have gotten created. So it gets created because they didn't hit their target. Your line here is that you would have paid more, then you would have paid at a higher contribution because CalPERS wasn't hitting their target. But the unfunded liability that you have with having issued the pension obligation bonds and put the money in is bigger than it would have been before, because you've given CalPERS an additional $120 million, and they fell short of their target. If they fall short of their target on that, they're falling short of their target on more money, which means it's a bigger shortfall in dollar terms. So if that happens and they hit 6%, the costs are going to go up. They'll go higher than they were. But still, over the course of this time, you still should expect to save about $21 million over that time period. So there's still significant savings if they hit 6%. If they hit 5%, the savings drop down. So again, the less they actually earn, the less you save. Again, for the same reasons. At 4%, you lose money. If the target basically hits the same thing, you've paid additional fees to consultants and others to make all this happen. And that is going to cause some small savings. So now if you look over time for most of the time period, any of the time periods that CalPERS has since they started investing in the stock market, which is in the 70s, CalPERS has earned over time more than 4% per year on average. But as you are, I'm sure you've heard before, past performance is no guarantee of future success. Bad things can happen. So first, quick summary, basically, the less they earn on their actual returns, the less of a savings you get, and there could be potentially a loss. The other thing I had started to mention before is early losses have a big, huge impact on savings. If the market drops down right after you put the money in, that can wipe out all of your savings. A huge drop in the market right after you put the money in, because basically what happens is you issue 120 million in bonds, you give it to CalPERS, they lose 10%, they lose 12 million. They've only gotten 108 million out of this. But you still need to pay bondholders as if it's 120 because it was 120. So, and even if they hit their targets after that, you're basically at a break-even point. So this is really the biggest risk, is a big loss right after you put the money into CalPERS. And there are some things that you can do if this is your biggest concern, especially given the volatility of the market. If it goes down, it doesn't bounce back up, because it has been bouncing back up right now. Then there are ways to deal with that. And that's, again, something after you decide, if you decide that you want to move forward with pension obligation bonds, there are potentially some steps you can take to lower this risk, down below. The other thing that people are concerned about is what happens if CalPERS keeps lowering their discount rate. Is that going to lower our savings? The answer to that is, in the short term, yes, but in the long term, no, because actual savings are based on actual returns. Now, if they lower their discount rate, it's probably because they're lowering the risk, lowering expected returns. So the lower expected returns will lower savings, but not to change the discount rate itself. So dropping from 6.8 to 6.5 might drop it from the 32 down to 24 million. So again, you still expect to get savings if they lower the discount rate, as long as they get close to hitting their target over time. Questions?
So Ira, in these different scenarios, there is a buffer like what we're looking at with the screen, or right here on the screen, that if a reduction in returns doesn't guarantee that this wasn't a good idea. It's a reduction in the rate of, or the amount of savings. And if we actually get to the point of loss, there's much larger things happening in the market.
Right. If they average a 4% return over the next 20 years, that is a significant change in the economy, the US economy, the world economy. You're going to have some pretty big issues to deal with anyway. Of course, that becomes the worst possible time to find out that you made a mistake back in 2022. But yeah, the thing is, if you look at past performance, their returns have been here over any of their 20-year periods, and in most cases up here at 7-8% per year. So savings could be even bigger. But again, if you find out later you did even better, I don't think anybody's going to be too upset. The question is, what if something goes wrong? And that's what we're trying to let you know, that things can go wrong, but I think the likelihood of it happening are relatively small. And your Bartel report tried to do that through a series of assumptions, and they came out with roughly 2/3 of the time you're going to do okay, and 1/3 of the time you're not. But again, they pushed the losses up front, and they had your payment stretched out over a longer period. By shortening the payment period, you increase the likelihood that this becomes a good deal.
So just for the council, and in summary, because we do have to wrap it up here. Next time we'll be bringing this back just to address questions and give the council some time to digest this or ask questions of staff. And some particulars of why we would go this direction and what the probability means.
And yeah, and I think it's also important, we recognize that this is a lot to digest in one meeting. I've worked with agencies and been sort of presenting and teaching pension concepts and investment concepts for decades. And I understand that it takes 2 or 3 times to hear this before all of the things kick in, and you really get to the full understanding of what it is and what you need to do. So giving you a chance to think about it for a couple weeks, come back, have questions, be able to prepare questions and to ask about the things that didn't make sense, or might have made sense when I said it, and then an hour later you've completely forgotten why it all made sense. That's perfectly normal. You'll get an opportunity to come back and ask the questions again, because you don't want to have to make these decisions until you feel comfortable and understand what's going on. The last couple of slides are just sort of repeating. There are other things you can do other than issuing pension obligation bonds, or more importantly, in addition to issuing pension obligation bonds, if you feel like doing it, to better control some of these risks and put you in a better position. So this is not, I'm not here to push pension obligation bonds. I'm here to make sure you understand about them.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, just to clarify for the council, this is GovInvest is not an investment bank. They're not our financial advisor. They're not our bond counsel. Those recommendations are separate, will be brought forward to the council in addition to this array of options, because as Ira pointed out, this is just one component. And so we'll bring that back to the council.
Okay, I appreciate the fact that you've given me so much time on one of your regular meetings. And again, be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ira, for all this information. It's a lot to digest. And so far, I believe I was able to follow, but does council have any questions, or if you want to come back with follow-up questions, we could come back with follow-up questions at the next meeting. Any questions from council? By the looks
No
of it,
question.
there's no questions. Ira, thank you for taking the time to go over this. As I mentioned, staff, if you guys have any, staff, council, if you have any questions, please reach out to Scott Williams, and then he can go over more details. Ira, thank you. Until next time.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now go on to item number 2, which we'd like to postpone and table for the next meeting just due to timing. Is that okay with council?
That's okay with me.
That's okay with me.
Looking like it's okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. We'll now go on to consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are to be approved with one motion. Items may be removed from consent calendar by any member of the council. Those items removed will be considered immediately after the consent calendar. Does council wish to pull any items for the consent calendar? And I actually want to pull number 9, if you don't mind. I just have a quick question on it. Council? Okay, seeing that there's no one wants to pull everything, may I get a motion for item number 1 through 8, and then 10 to 14?
I'll move.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, with the motion from Larios and a second from Lopez. Lisa?
Merlo, not Lopez.
Oh, Merlo, sorry. It's because Crystal popped up on my screen.
It would be helpful if when you made the motion, you just state your name. So we have a motion by Councilmember Lario, seconded by Councilmember Merlo to approve consent calendars 1 through 8 and 10 through 14. Mayor Ibarra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember Larios,
Yes.
Councilmember Merlo.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. If we could talk about item number 9, I just have a quick question. Overall, I just want to understand if you had, when we went into this agreement with Arroyo Group, was this part of it included or this just come up last minute?
So this was not contemplated in the original agreement that we went. This has just kind of evolved organically, and that's the result of receiving input from stakeholders and also the one-on-one interviews that were held at the very initiation of this. So as we've progressed through this, we've uncovered a few things. For example, we didn't know that the Vernon Truck Corridor was going to be
That's right.
something that developed out of this. Also, there's a need for a little more decision maker education and engagement about where this process is going. So that's why we're bringing this amendment to the agreement.
Okay, so it's just something that came up, it was never even included?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. If I could get a motion on number 9, please? Or any questions from council? No? Okay, if I get a motion on number 9, if you guys can state your name when you motion it, please.
Move Lopez.
I get a second?
Second.
With the motion from Lopez and a second from Davis, City Clerk.
To find the action exempt under CEQA and approve and authorize the city administrator to execute amendment number 2 to the services agreement with the Arroyo Group. Mayor Ibarra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez.
Yes.
Councilmember Larios,
Yes.
Councilmember Merlo.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll now go on to new business. Agenda item number 15 is regulation of sidewalk vending. Public Works Director Wall will present the staff report.
Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, sidewalk vending in Vernon is currently unregulated. City staff does not have the tools to control vending for the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the public without adding regulations to our municipal code. Council has provided staff with guidance concerning sidewalk vending regulation at 3 previous meetings. Staff has taken that guidance and crafted the ordinance before you. Regulations in the ordinance include prohibiting all vending within 500 feet of schools and transit stops, prohibiting stationary vending in areas zoned residential or adjacent to residential uses, limiting mobile sidewalk vending to operating only between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. in areas zoned residential or adjacent to residential uses. The regulations also require that vendors selling food obtain the appropriate health permits and that all vendors undergo annual fingerprinting background checks. The ordinance would deny a permit to anyone that has been convicted of any of the following crimes or an attempt or conspiracy to commit any of the following crimes: murder, mayhem, kidnapping, robbery, assault, battery, rape, arson, burglary, possession of burglarious instruments or deadly weapons, or any crime for which the applicant is required to register as a sex offender. Staff recommends council introduce the ordinance to provide staff with the tools necessary to control vending for the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the public. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council at this time? Are there any public comment on Zoom?
There are currently none.
Great. Seeing that there's no further questions or any comments, may I get a motion from the council?
I'll move Lopez.
May I get a second?
Second Davis.
Okay, with the motion from Councilmember Lopez and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Davis, City Clerk. Lisa, you're on mute.
Lisa, you're still mute, yes.
Sorry, just popped up at me. The motion is to find the action exempt under CEQA, waive full reading and introduce and conduct first reading of ordinance 1276, adding chapter 12.10 sidewalk vending to title 12, street sidewalks and public places of the municipal code, and direct staff to schedule second reading and adoption for the February 15th council meeting. Mayor Ibarra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
yes,
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember Larios,
Yes.
Councilmember Merlot.
Yes, sorry, I thought I was on.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll now go on to item number 16, the amendment to classification and compensation plan. Human Resource Director Earl will present the staff report.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. Staff is recommending approval of a revised job description and salary range for police officer recruit. In recent years, the police department has been very effective in recruiting police officers from candidates who have enrolled themselves in and are currently attending the police academy. Candidates who are hired while attending the academy are then sponsored by the city and receive salary and benefits while completing their academy education and training. Additionally, these candidates often get training and experience working in the police department when the academy is not in session. Upon graduation, candidates are promoted into the position of police officer, where they begin their field training as a Vernon police officer. While attending the academy, these future police officer candidates are appropriately classified as police officer recruits, as they do not yet meet the qualifications to be police officers. The market for high-quality police officer candidates is highly competitive. Recruiting and hiring quality candidates while they're in the police academy by providing a competitive salary and a commitment from the city to the candidates for a clear path to becoming police officers with the city gives the city a competitive advantage in securing candidates to become future police officers. That concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council at this time on item number 16?
No, not at this moment.
Are there any Zoom questions?
There are currently none.
Okay, seeing that there's no questions at all on this item, may I have a motion?
Larios, I'll move.
Merlot, I'll second.
Okay, with a motion from Councilmember Larios and a second from Councilmember Lopez, City Clerk, may you call the roll, please?
Lisa, your mic's muted again.
Sorry. Motion is to approve and authorize the city administrator to execute an at-will employment agreement for the appointment of Angela P.
Right.
Sorry.
Do you want to start all over?
Let's try this again. We're on item number 16, right?
Yes.
A motion by Councilmember Lario, seconded by Councilmember Merlot to approve revised job description for police office recruit and adopt resolution 2022-02 amending the classification and compensation plan. Mayor Ibarra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
yes,
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember, I think that was Larios, Councilmember Lopez.
Yes, are you not hearing me?
Now I heard you.
Oh,
Councilmember
okay.
Merlot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. We'll now go on to item number 17 is the at-will employment agreement for Deputy City Administrator. Human Resource Director Earl will present the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. After several years of leaving the position of Deputy City Administrator vacant, City Administration has determined that there's a significant need to fill this position in order to accomplish the many special projects, programs, and long-term goals of the city. This position assists the City Administrator and the operating departments in strategic planning, policy development, prioritizing work, and completing a variety of special projects. Following a promotional recruitment process, the City Administrator has made a conditional offer of employment to Angela Kimmy to fill the vacant Deputy City Administrator position. Many of you may know Angela from her work in the Public Utilities Department and more recently in her role as Acting Deputy City Administrator. Angela has considerable experience in managing governmental programs in a variety of areas and has more than 20 years of experience working with elected officials as a municipal employee as well as a political professional, campaigning, fundraising, and lobbying at the state level up to the White House. Ms. Kemi has a bachelor's degree in Spanish and political science and a master's degree in public administration. Upon approval by City Council, Ms. Kemi's appointment is effective January 31st, 2022. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions on this item? Okay, are there any questions on Zoom?
There are currently no raised hands.
Okay, seeing that there's no questions for this item, may I get a motion?
I move Davis.
I
May I have a
second
second?
Larios.
With
I'll
the motion
second.
from, with the motion from Mayor Pro Tem Davis and a second from Councilmember Larios, City Clerk?
To approve and authorize city administrator to execute an at-will employment agreement for the appointment of Angela P. Kemi to Deputy City Administrator, effective January 31st, 2022. Mayor Ibarra,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember Larios,
Yes.
Councilmember Merlot.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll go on to oral reports. City Administrator Fandino, do you have any oral reports?
Carlos, you're currently muted.
Sorry. I'd like to skip the oral reports and table them for the next meeting, but we did have some outages that we currently would like to share, but in lieu of time, I'd like to skip that and we'll bring them back at the next council meeting.
Thank you. City Council, do you have any reports?
I do have a report. So during the last 2 weeks of January, I attended various virtual conference sessions hosted by the League of California Cities as part of their new Mayors and Councils Members Academy. The fiscal impact of my participation was a total of $250 charged to the City Council's budget. I found this academy helpful and especially enjoyed the effective advocacy and key issue sessions. I look forward to attending future educational conferences. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from City Council?
Mayor, if
Yes.
I may just add one other thing, we are having the MGS Town Hall meeting. Residents and businesses are welcome to attend the city's upcoming virtual town hall meeting to discuss the recent acquisition of MGS. And the town hall meeting is scheduled for February 9th at 11:30 a.m. and will focus on the motivation in the behind the purchase of the power plant and how that decision will benefit residents and businesses here in Vernon. A flyer will be delivered to residents and businesses with Zoom participation information. And that'll be coming out soon. And then I'll be leaving today for up north for the city managers, California League of Cities annual conference in Monterey. And it's designed for city managers and assistant city managers. The conference provides essential information and updates needed to effectively run a city. And I'll provide a report when I get back.
Thank you. Are there any further comments, reports, questions? Okay, seeing that we don't have any further, are we gonna go into successor agency right now before closed session or after? You're on mute.
You could recess the council meeting and convene the successor agency or go to closed session and come back to the successor agency. I would leave that up to your discretion.
I would say let's go into successor agency just to get everybody out of here so they don't have to come back after closed session. If that's okay with council,
Yeah.
that is fine if you don't want to unmute. Okay, then I'll convene this meeting, city meeting, and I'll open up the successor agency meeting. And we'll see you in about a year. And then we'll go into closed session for the city council meeting. We'll leave this meeting and click on the Zoom link that was provided. See you in a bit. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Okay, we're back from a closed session at 11:23. Interim Attorney Musa, can you please report out?
Council met in closed session on items 18 and 19. On item 18, there was no reportable action taken. On item 19, council directed staff to engage an executive search firm for the recruitment of an in-house city attorney and to move forward with that process.
With no further reporting other than that, I now call this meeting to end. It is now 11:23. Have a wonderful full week and we'll see you in 2 weeks.